The Thunderhawk gunship screamed towards its destination. It was a long journey. Almost no one spoke. The only thing that could be heard was the drone of the engines and the occasional Vox messages from the pilot providing position coordinates. Most humans would be feeling intense anxiety as they prepared themselves for what could be a last stand defending some powerful psychic artifact. However, the Emperor's Space Marines knew no fear, and the Ogryns were generally not intelligent enough to experience anticipation or anxiety. Ogg was mostly eager to try out his new power maul on the bad bugs he would face. Commissar Gallus gathered himself. He was a 12-year veteran of numerous campaigns, but he still had to contend with the fears and anxieties of being a mortal man on the eve of battle. He prayed to the Emperor for strength. Below the vessel, guard battle formations marched forward. The columns of men and machines became more numerous and dense as they drew near to the ancient city of Lupercalia. Occasionally, squads of Imperial Knights marched inexorably forward to face the tyrannic threat. In the distance, the dark, billowing clouds of smoke foretold of a monumental battle taking place. The previous engagements were dwarfed by the scale of this one. The Tyranids had focused the bulk of their forces here, choosing to secure the continent and assault Lupercalia itself. The other offensives were simply designed to tie up Imperial resources while they isolated their true target. However, the new offensive led by the Custodes was making rapid progress. As the Thunderhawk drew near to the battle, the sound of explosions and the cacophony of war could be heard over the sounds of the engines as millions of humans in bioforms died beneath them. There was a strange haze that seemed to hang over the battlefield, with large shapes moving through the strange fog. As the pilot drew closer, he could see that the haze was in fact a swarm of gargoyles and hive crones, with several Harridan biotitans circling high above the battlefield, content to let their smaller brethren wear down the Imperial forces until they saw suitable high-value targets they could swoop down and destroy. The pilot of the Thunderhawk was a Deathwatch Marine who calmly and skillfully skirted the edges of the swarm, waiting for the best moment to make his desperate attempt to force his way through the mass of winged bioforms. The pilot called back another series of coordinates. Inquisitor Torix was quick in relaying the information with his own Voxcaster.
Guardsmen, Inquisitorial Order Invictus 374407. Confirmation Omicron Delta Epsilon.
After a pause, the Vox crackled to life.
This is Yuzbashi Suleiman of the 104th Denisovan Armored Corps. Inquisitorial Order acknowledged and confirmed. We will make sure you have some friendly skies, Lord Inquisitor. Imperator Korush.
There was another pause before suddenly the skies burst with flak as inky black clouds erupted in the midst of the Tyranid swarm. The Hydra tanks of the 104th raked through the teeming mass of bioforms, creating a narrow corridor for the Thunderhawk to pass through. The pilot throttled the engine and the transport plunged into the smoky cover provided by the flak. The turbulence was intense. Ogg and Gallus had reminded the Ogryns to hold on tight as they made their approach. With all the Ogryns holding on tightly, numerous times they would find themselves leaving their feet as the ship would suddenly climb or fall because of the tumultuous air currents. Unfortunately, the winds were not still, and a stiff breeze began to slowly remove the cover from the Thunderhawk. Once the Tyranids had visual on the ship, they began to swarm towards it. The twin-linked heavy bolters on the Thunderhawk roared into use, shredding the endless hordes of gargoyles as their bioweapons peppered the heavily armored hull of the Thunderhawk. The ship cannon and the two mounted las cannons were of little use against such small enemies. The ship began to rock more violently as gargoyles spattered against it. Some of the things were able to land on the Thunderhawk itself, but were quickly ripped apart by the heavy bolters. There was a loud crash as one of the flying bioforms crashed directly into the right vehicle engine. The lights in the cargo hold flickered, and the Lamenters and Ogryns were suddenly bathed in the red emergency light. More cracks, splatters, and crashes as more creatures flung their bodies at the Thunderhawk. Gallus could feel them losing altitude. The engines were whirring and struggling. The pilot dropped lower to the ground, black smoke streaming from both engines, covered in acid burns and gouges from the vicious bioweapons of the Tyranids. Limping, but still in the air, the Thunderhawk emerged from the cloud of enemies and began moving towards one of the great citadels of Lupercalia. As the pilot did so, 2 hive crones slipped out of the swarm and dropped behind the Thunderhawk. These creatures were much closer in size to the Thunderhawk with heavier weapons. With horrid screeches, they unleashed clusters of parasitic missile creatures that homed in on the transport. The pilot released flares and took evasive maneuvers, but the capabilities of the craft were severely limited. The first cluster missed. The pilot began weaving in and out of the spires jutting out from the metropolis below. Some of the missiles struck the buildings. A few managed to stay on target, streaking towards the Thunderhawk. The pilot pulled up rapidly, and those in the cargo hold had to contend with the powerful G-forces pulling them towards the drop ramp. Then the missiles hit. They struck the craft in the rear, tearing open the drop ramp and sending the Thunderhawk tumbling upward with the force of the blast. One of the Bullgryns, Dale, lost his footing and instinctively put his arms out to cushion his fall, letting go of the rail. The poor Ogryn tumbled out of the back of the ship into the smoke below. Shrapnel ricocheted around the hold, but this was nothing to the heavily armored Bullgryns and Lamenters. The pilot had climbed up deliberately just to get a bit more altitude as they began to fall towards Lupercalia. The engines were dead now. All that could be done now was to glide the Thunderhawk as close as they could get to the target landing area. With the drop ramp gone, the Lamenters opened fire with their storm bolters at the trailing hive crones. 10 of the Terminators were outfitted with long-range weapons, while others were equipped for melee. Whatever the Tyranids were expecting when they attacked, they did not anticipate the sheer volume of firepower pouring out of the cargo hold of this ship. The first hive crone was positively engulfed in bolter fire, ripping the large bioform to shreds. The other tried to peel away, but an assault cannon raked across the winged creature, tearing it to pieces. With the enemies destroyed, the Lamenters and Ogryns prepared for a crash landing. They were past the main lines now. Most of the Tyranids were engaged at the front. There were no vast swarms here that they could see. Deep in the heart of Lupercalia was likely a different matter. The pilot dipped the nose of the Thunderhawk and pulled up at the last second in an effort to slow down their forward momentum as much as possible. With this final act, the belly of the ship slammed into Lupercalia, sparks spraying out from underneath her. This was hardly a landing pad, and the rough, battle-torn causeway that they landed on caused the Thunderhawk to wobble and pitch. As she shook, her wings struck the ground, tearing them free, causing the ship to pitch over to the other side and tearing off the other wing. She then slammed over onto her side before finally sliding to a halt about 100 meters from the drop zone. They had made it. Now, they had to fight their way to the target and defend it to the last man if necessary. No man do they call me. My mother and my father, and all my comrades as well. Hey everybody, I hope you all enjoyed this installment of Ogg the Ogryn. If you liked what you heard, please leave a like and comment below, as it makes Ogg very happy. If you are new to this channel, make sure to enlist with the subscribe button below. If you have absolutely no idea what's going on, you can click on the playlist link and start Ogg's story from the beginning. And if you would like to shower me with riches that would make the Emperor's Golden Throne appear copper by comparison, feel free to support me on Patreon or donate to me via PayPal. Thank you all very much. No man out.